going on, everybody? AJ here, going to give you guys a breakdown, obviously a video breakdown for UFC 262. We're going to get right down to business. I'm going to leave the plugs for the middle. I'm going to try something different. And let's start from the first fight of the night, Soriano taking on Christos Jagos, and we'll work our way on up. Sound good? Let's just check the comments real quick. Got a comment from Rex. What's up, Rex? Let's go, AJ. Let's go, Rex. Yeah, appreciate you, man. Thank you for the encouragement as always, and best of luck this weekend, man. So first fight of the night, we got Jagos and Soriano. This fight was relatively put together rather soon. Soriano, former UFC fighter. This is his second stint with the UFC, moving up a weight class here. He's taking this fight on short notice, specifically notified on May 6th. So it's just a few short days to prepare, which I do think could be important for this matchup. He's going to be fighting up a weight class against a bigger Christos Jagos at lightweight. We can see that here on Tapology. I'll try and enlarge it so you can see if you can already. If it will let me enlarge it, there we go, 155. So there you go, Jagos. It won't be as evident in the statistics, but I think when these two guys are standing next to each other at say weigh-ins, we're going to see Jagos have the bigger frame, and I do think that could be a difference maker in this fight. Soriano basically is a striker, I'd say. He's proficient in scrambles as well. He's very explosive early on. The thing that I don't like about him in terms of his scrambling, he notoriously gives up his back. He's been submitted in a lot of his losses, including by guys that aren't really known for their submission grappling, including Levan Makashvili, who in a fairly long pro MMA career had not gotten a submission victory prior to the Soriano fight or after. So Soriano, his submission grappling has always been a weakness. We saw that in his first UFC stint. He was taken down several times and submitted by Charles Rosa, taken down a few times by Kawajiri, submitted there. And he was also taken down several times and put in a submission attempt by Chez Skelly. And that hasn't changed all too much from what I've seen on the regional scene. Kind of perplexingly, he doesn't really spread a wide base when an opponent shoots a double leg on him against the fence, which I'd say is rather rare at the UFC level. And like we talked about, Jagos could have some size here. I do think that Jagos is the better wrestler. Jagos is actually one of the rare guys in the UFC that sets up his takedowns with strikes. He'll throw an overhand right and then duck under, like he showed in his last fight against Carlton Muniz. He's also got the ability to chain wrestle. So I do think that the takedowns will be here for Jagos. But kind of like Soriano, they both have very questionable cardio. That has been probably Jagos's biggest hindrance in his career. His cardio, he usually tires towards the end of round two. We saw that against Jakar Close. He had Jakar Close, back mounted, threatened with a rear naked choke, but Close was able to survive, and it basically weathered the storm and basically put it on Jagos to close out round two strong, win the round, and then win round three and ultimately the fight. And then same thing against Damir Hadzovic. Granted, Jagos won that fight. He came through as an underdog, but he still slowed down there in round three, flopped to his back, was willing to be on his back for the remainder, a little over a minute or so left of the fight. So that is always going to be a question that I have about Jagos. I actually think he's a fairly well-rounded and skilled fighter, but just the cardio has been a hindrance, and cardio is one of the most important facets of MMA. It could arguably be the most important facet of MMA, because if your cardio doesn't check out, it could be a huge, it could be something that holds the fighter back. They could be winning the fight comfortably, but if that one point where they're on E on the gas tank, they could just fall apart, and that could be a loss, even if they're winning comfortably. Mirsad Bektic versus Darren Elkins comes to mind. We've seen other examples in the past as well. But you guys get what I mean. It's a very important. And so Soriano, I think he's got the advantage striking. I do think he throws the harder strikes despite moving up a weight class. I think he's more technical. I think his punches are just sharper. I think he's a bit more diverse. He's got a low kick. He's got good variety with his combinations to Soriano. He's also got some power and some fast hands as well. So I don't think he's going to knock Jagos out just because Jagos has shown a pretty good chin. Has only been knocked out once professionally in a large sample size. It was to a heavy-handed Josh Emmett that we know hits so very hard. There was a stat I tweeted out about Emmett recently. At featherweight, Emmett has 10 knockdowns in 6 fights. So the man certainly has some power in his hands. So it's certainly not a bad thing for Jagos to get knocked out by Emmett. So if it stays standing, I think I would favor Soriano. I just think he's a better striker. I think his volume is better, and I think he's the bigger finishing threat. His punches are just harder and he's faster. But I think what it comes down to is Jagos is just much more prepared. He's the larger fighter. He's got the better wrestling and better grappling here. I think he'll be able to take Soriano down, pass his guard, and potentially get a rear naked choke, although I do lean a decision because Jagos is mainly a decision fighter. The last time he did get a submission was in 2015, and even in his last fight against Carlton Minus, when he was in dominant position, he really showed to be a position over submission type grappler there. So that's why I lean decision and not submission. So the pick is Christos Jagos. Next fight, we work on up to Kevin Aguilar and Tucker Lutz. I just taped this fight earlier today. I do think it is a competitive fight per the betting odds. Let me just pull those up for reference here. I'll pull the good old Pets fight odds up. We got Tucker Lutz here taking his UFC debut. Aguilar, the more experienced UFC fighter, but I do favor Lutz in the matchup. The thing with Aguilar is he just doesn't have a whole lot of depth to his game. Like, yeah, he's a solid defensive wrestler. He's got good takedown defense overall. And he's got some power in his hands. He's a capable boxer, but that's about it. He's not a guy that really varies his attack. He's not a guy that I'd say his durability is the strongest. We've seen him rocked a few times in the UFC. He's been rocked by guys that aren't even power punchers, like Charles Rosa, Enrique Barzola. I mean, he was rocked and finished by Tukugov, a guy that actually has power, was able to put him out. He was also rocked badly by Dan Ige there. So, and he also doesn't go for takedowns, and he's also fairly low output in striking exchanges as Aguilar. Just doesn't show a lot of urgency to close distance. And like I said, he just is primarily a boxer. So he's not leveraging tools at range, such as kicks, things like that. And even that, you know, he's not a great technical striker, I'd say. Doesn't come from like a Muay Thai background or a kickboxing background, anything like that. And his head is fairly stationary on the center line, and that's part of the reason why he's been hit cleanly several times. He's also BJJ purple belt. Lutz, I don't think he's going to go on like a title run in the UFC. Not that I'm doubting him. I think he's talented, but I do think he's a better fighter here. I just think he's got a bit more depth to his game. He could switch stances on you. I think Lutz is the more varied striker. He's more willing to throw in combination in terms of like with his hands and his kicks. Aguilar is willing to throw in boxing combinations, but not so much with his kicks. If anything, Aguilar has like a low kick occasionally, but that's it. Lutz has a hard body kick, good combinations, low, high. He's also a decent wrestler, I'd say, is Lutz. You know, power double leg against the fence. I don't think he'll have a ton of success taking Aguilar down, but I think it gives Lutz another path to victory. If there are takedowns to be landed, they would more likely come from Lutz, in my opinion. He's also a capable grappler in top position as Lutz. He looks to pass guard in the top position, sinks in the body triangle for back control. He's also a guillotine choke threat as well. But just like Aguilar, his head is on the center line when trading in the pocket. He's susceptible to counters. I'd say he's not a threatening top control grappler as Lutz. He's not particularly a dangerous finisher there. I'd say he's more of like a control grappler. And his takedown defense is also a bit shaky. He was taken out easily by Blackledge in round 2 of his Contender Series fight, the second one. And also his back was taken by Gibson at the end of round 3 in his first Contender Series fight, and the body triangle was in. And he's also willing to strike with opponents that, you know, his path least resistance is to wrestle, like in that first Contender Series fight against Gibson. So I question his game plan a little bit. I don't like fighters that, you know, fight with an ego all the time. I like it when fighters, like, you know, play to their strengths. They know where it makes the most sense on paper to exploit the opposition, and they take that path. But it was at least nice to see Tucker go to his wrestling a bit in that second Contender Series fight. So I'm not too high on either guy, but I do think that Lutz is a bit more well-rounded. I understand the hesitation that people have in general with a lot of the Contender Series fighters being a bit overhyped, but there's also been some examples of Contender Series fighters panning out just fine. Like, look at Alex Perez, for instance. I know he's coming off a loss to Davison Figueiredo, but like, he actually made it to a title shot. He got an opportunity to fight the best, flyweight in the world right now, who has got the title. You know, Kevin Holland, prior to his recent skid, was on a tremendous winning streak last year. Dan Ige is another fighter that comes to mind, a very good fighter, came from the Contender Series. Jeff Neal, I know that some of these guys have had some struggles recently, but like, let's actually look at their whole UFC careers, right? They've turned out to be very talented fighters. So I'm not ready to just write off guys just because they come from the Contender Series. Yeah, I get it. Some fighters come a little overrated. You know, maybe if we see a knockout on the Contender Series, it could inflate the betting line, but that I'm still not looking at this Contender Series fighters and going like, man, they're from the Contender Series. I just want to fade them. No. I got to look at their skill set. And I do think that Lutz is a fairly solid fighter. It's not like I'm going to bet him or anything here, but I do think that he gets his hand raised. I just think he's got a bit more depth to his game. Gina Mazzoni and Priscilla Caceres. We have Gina Mazzoni, one of the bigger favorites on the card. She is minus 210. I'm looking at 5 dimes right now on best fight odds and best fight odds. And I do tend to agree with her being favored. She trains at the better camp. She, of course, if I could get that out, trains at Glory MMA Fitness, which is, of course, James Krause's camp. And in addition to his fighters just like winning, which is obviously always a plus, he's just actually like a really good strategic coach. Like he's able to instruct these fighters in such a way where, like, if they're fighting a non-optimal way most of their career, like 40 fights into it per se, he's able to, sort of explain to them like, hey, that's not the right way you should be fighting. Let's try and go like position over submission type grappling rather than, submission one or bust. And I'm referring to a fighter in Derek Minner who we saw against Charles Rosa, go out there and fight a hard 3 rounds, win a decision. When like usually Minner's MO prior to that fight was go out there, get a quick submission. And granted, the guy was very good at it, but if he didn't get that quick finish, he tended to get finished. But I got to give credit where credit is due, and credit to all parties involved there. But what I'm trying to say is Krause is a great mind. I'm not the only one to say that, but I want to give more and more props to Krause, because it's not just the fact that his fighters have been winning a lot recently. It's just like the pep talks that he gives them in between rounds. It's, like what's going on during training, who's like fighters are becoming more and more wise to the fact that this man is such a great coach, and they're willing to travel to the Midwest and get his guidance on what they need to do to succeed. And so I view that as a plus for Mazzoni. I do think that she wins here because she's the better wrestler, and similar to the Jagos and Soriano breakdown. I think that's what it comes down to. I think Caceres has to keep the fight upright, where in theory she could win. Maybe she could win by knockout. I mean, she's coming off a knockout win. Mazzoni, we have seen hurt in the past. Granted, it was at bantamweight against Avila and Chiasson, who have shown definitely some power in their hands. So I'm not quite sold that for sure if Caceres hits her clean that she's getting a knockout. It's certainly possible though. Caceres, she's willing to pressure. She throws volume. She's ultra tough, ultra durable, willing to throw in combination. She trains with Jessica Andrade. So even though she's at the inferior camp on paper, she's definitely getting some very high quality training partners as Caceres, but she's also very flawed. That we'll get into. She just doesn't move her head off the center line. Her striking is fairly predictable. She just mainly wings hooks. There's an occasional jab in there, a knee, a low kick, and her takedown defense in this matchup in particular is just a huge concern. Going back to the Molly McCann fight, she was taken down from a double leg by Molly McCann in round 1, taken down easily by McCann in round 3 from a caught kick. And then once on the ground, we've seen her struggle there as well. Her back was taken by McCann. She was put in a submission attempt by McCann. Nearly armbarred there in round 1, mounted by McCann. I mean, against Luana Carolina, she was mounted by her in round 2, put in a mounted guillotine choke. I mean, it's just she's just got a lot of technical holes in her game. I mean, again, I applaud her toughness and her willingness to walk forward and throw volume, and she's just not going to give up in there at all. Like, she will just keep fighting, and I really admire that. And to her credit, I did think her footwork looked a lot better, even though it was very brief against Shanna Dobson. I mean, she wasn't. She actually did a better job of moving laterally and not just like following and stalking the opposition like she showed that she did in the Carolina fight. So I like the improvement out of from what I saw there, even though it was very brief. It still gave me hope that she's actually going back, realizing what she needs to work on, and she's doing it. But like we say, I do think that most likely she needs to keep the fight upright, where in theory she could win. Again, I like her pace. Her pace is higher than Mazzoni's. I think that she's more willing to take damage than Mazzoni. And I think she's the bigger finishing threat than Mazzoni is on the feet. But like we say, I just think that Mazzoni's going to be able to land takedowns here. She's not a great wrestler, but she's a capable one. She's got the ability to mat return. She's got a double leg, trips in the clinch as well. She strikes to get in the clinch and get the fight to the ground, which is what I like about her. Again, she's not like an elite level talent at this weight class, but like she at least recognizes what she's good at. She goes out there and she executes it. And especially with James Krause in her corner and Tim Elliott, who she's very close with, I expect them to come in with a good game plan as well. She sinks in both hooks that presented the back and looks to pass guard in top position. So she's got a true process to her game, definitely more of a process to her game than Caceres does. So that's why she's going to be my pick to win. I just think that she's a better wrestler and a better grappler, and therefore she should be able to control where the fight goes, and she should be able to impose her skill set there and probably win probably a somewhat tidy decision. I think that Caceres, again, she's just so tough and everything. She's not going to give up. But I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if Mazzoni got a rear naked choke just based off the McCann fight. I know it was a couple of years ago now, but McCann isn't exactly known for her grappling. And if she was putting Caceres in those susceptible spots on the ground, I think that Mazzoni has it in her wheelhouse as well. So my pick is going to be Mazzoni. I understand her being the favorite. Jamie Pickett and Jordan Wright. We got about a pick 'em here, and I tend to agree with that as well. I just think it's a super close fight to call, and I am more than okay with passing on fights like these. Just again, I think it's better long term for me at least to just pass than to try and feel the urge to bet every fight. And it's it's for a multitude of reasons, but this is just a fight that right away I kind of knew like I was going to bet on prior to even film study. It's just because, with all due respect to these guys, they just have a lot of holes in their game. Jordan Wright, you could already tell where I'm going now. Jordan Wright, he does have hard knees in the clinch. He's got some power in that right hand. He likes to, bounce around, move laterally on the outside, behind the back line, which I'm not a huge fan of. The black line, that is. So against, like, say, a wrestler who wants to shoot takedowns on him, that it makes it that much easier for them to close the distance, get on a double, and just kind of scoop them if they back him up against the fence. But I don't think he'll have to worry about that too much in this matchup. Pickett did go for a takedown against Nchukwi last time out. I'm not sold on him being a great grappler, but I guess if there are takedowns to be landed, they would more likely come from Pickett just because he's more willing to wrestle, even though he's not a good wrestler or grappler himself. I do think he's vulnerable there as well as Pickett. 37% takedown defense. He just doesn't really show a sprawl. He was controlled on the ground by Punahele Soriano in the Contender Series, who is a good fighter. Like, he's shown to have some heavy hands, but I'm not sold on the guy's cardio, and the fact that he was able to control Pickett on the ground, I think, says a bit about Pickett's cardio as well. And additionally, Pickett was tired towards the end of round one in his most recent Contender Series fight against Patti. He also fights at a low pace, this Pickett. And he's also both of them, really, Pickett and Wright. They're both of their chins are high in striking exchanges. I think they're both very hittable in the pockets. I do think that Pickett is on paper a bit longer, just 3 inches of reach. Pickett mainly just wants to operate out of both stances as a striker. He utilizes a hard, fast jab. This Pickett, he likes to basically stick and move on the outside. He also has some various kicks. He'll go low, he'll go high, to the side, to the body at range. And again, he does have some wrestling, a good duck under double leg takedown against the fence. I'd say his grappling awareness overall in top position is good. He's got decent get-ups from bottom position. He's also guillotine choke threat as well. And ultimately why I'm picking Pickett here is I just think he's more durable. Again, I think that, Wright, with them both really showing a lot of defensive holes in the stand-up, I just think that either guy in theory, I guess, is capable of knocking out the other, but we've seen Pickett more than once face dangerous guys and survive. He took clean shots from Punahele Soriano. Puna did hurt him in round one, but Pickett recovered very well. He's never been knocked out professionally in 16 fights, whereas like Wright, officially he's only been knocked out once by Buckley, but he got knocked out cold by Hernandez. I know officially on paper it says it's a no contest, but going back and watching that, he got put out cold there. And even against, Buckley, he was concussed twice in that fight. He got knocked down bad at the end of round one. And then he was, the commentary team, I trust all those guys to take their word, Bisping and the crew and Ack. They were saying, or maybe it was Fitzgerald that night, I can't remember, but they were saying how Wright was slurring his words in between the corner there. And, and it makes sense, right? He just got dropped bad and wobbled. And then, within the first 30 seconds of the second round, Buckley put him out cold. He was just badly hurt. Like I said, the Hernandez fight, he got knocked out cold in as well. So I just think that with Wright not being able to control distance particularly well, he's a long rangey guy for this weight class. He's 6'2", but he doesn't use a consistent jab. He's just mainly just moving laterally on the outside and throwing kicks. And I just think that Pickett being a bit more diverse of a striker, more durable, and I'd say a bit more tested of the two, probably gets him the nod here, but it's a high variance fight, guys. There's nothing wrong with passing. I say a prediction because I want to give a prediction, but it's not as if like I'm picking this guy and therefore I can't see the other fighter winning. It's just, I think of it as probabilities, right? Like I think most likely Pickett wins, but it's not as if like 100%, Pickett wins. It's close to a 50-50 fight in my opinion. So I agree with the odds in that sense. All right. Andrea Lee and Antonina Shevchenko here. We've got this fight taking place at flyweight. There's been some action coming in on Lee. Let me just double check. Let me refresh best fight odds. Yes, Lee, you can have her around a pick 'em on certain sites, looking at here. But, plus 100, plus 105, as you could see, just looking at the different sites. And I tend to agree it's a dog or pass matchup. Andrea Lee is a fighter who I do think is very talented. I just think that she's had a hindrance that has unfortunately cost her a few fights, a couple hindrances, that is. I mean, she's a brown belt in brown belt in judo is Andrea. So she's got the takedown capabilities from the clinch. She's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu brown belt, so she's definitely very capable in grappling situation as well. She is a black belt in Kyokushin karate, capable striker. She throws in combination. She's got kickboxing and boxing credentials. Andrea throws in high volume, over 5 significant strikes per minute. She landed over 100 significant strikes against Lauren Murphy and Ashley Evans Smith. And she's, got decent technical defensive concepts in terms of the grappling. She stuffs the head of the opposition if she gets taken down. She fishes for underhooks. She utilizes a wizard. But going back to the point, the couple hindrances to her game is, well, one, even while standing, even though I think she's a good fighter and everything in the striking department, she is a pressure striker. And so naturally she's just walking forward and, she's going to be taking some strikes. She's okay taking some strikes as a pressure striker just because optically it makes sense. If you're just willing to walk forward for 15 minutes, that's kind of the style that is more acceptable there. So she's been landed on a bit, particularly like the Calderwood fight. She definitely got landed on a bit there, as well as parts of the Murphy fight as well, but also her takedown defense. Her takedown defense has unfortunately been just a big hindrance on her career. I mean, I don't think she's a downright bad wrestler, but she's been taken out easily a few times by Montana De La Rosa. She even gave up her back there against Montana. She also throws a lot of naked kicks, which in turn cost her some takedowns against Roxanne Modafferi. Roxanne took her down there. Once they're at the end of round 1 and round 2, she was also taken out from body locks by Roxanne, and was also taken out easily by Calderwood. So she could scramble well. She could get up after getting taken down at a reasonable rate. She doesn't do it right away all the time, but that unfortunately has been, in a fight that goes to decision where it's relatively competitive on the feet and she's the fighter getting taken down, that unfortunately has cost her some fights. The Lauren Murphy fight, very competitive on the feet. I think you could argue Andrea was winning on the feet. I think you can make a very good argument. But Murphy was able to seal off some rounds by landing some takedowns there at the very end. And, when you have that visual of, how you finish the round, Murphy's landing the takedown, she's ending up on top. Well, the judges could, of course, see that as a positive for Murphy and score her the round. So I'm not saying I agree with it or disagree with it, but I'm just trying to put myself in the judges' shoes and try and justify why they, maybe gave Andrea, or why they maybe gave Lauren, that fight and not Andrea. So that's my kind of long-winded rant about Andrea Lee. I do think she's talented, but she's just got two clear parts of her game that have kind of hindered her and prevented her from, winning more fights. Again, she's got a decent resume in the UFC, but she's lost 3 in a row. And I do think that this is actually a spot on paper that she wins on, honestly. I think that while the stand-up is competitive, I think that Antonina's striking is very good. Just like her sister, she's a Muay Thai striker. She's very accomplished in Muay Thai, actually. She utilizes various kicks, but they're mainly feelers, so she could encourage the opposition for counter strikes. A counter striker is Antonina. That's what she excels in. And I'd say that her straight left is her best punch. She's also very strong in the clinch, hard knees, controls the head very well with that Muay Thai clinch. She manages distance very well. She utilizes front kicks and good footwork. And, she's got decent variety as well. So in the stand-up, I think Antonina is more technical, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it be very close just based on the optics. Andrea, I think, is going to be the fighter that's a bit more willing to walk forward, and I think she's going to be throwing more volume and perhaps landing more, and that could help her win the aggregate of the striking exchanges. I don't think either fighter's a big finishing threat on the feet, so it would more than likely go to decision. But why I think that Andrea has a better chance here than, say, Antonina winning, even if it's by a slight margin, is because I think she's the better wrestler here. Again, I know that Andrea has struggled with that in the past, but I do think she's a bit better of a wrestler here. Antonina mainly headlocks and head and arm throws, which in turn, she's landed takedowns off of those, a couple of them, but in turn, she got her back taken briefly by Ariane Lipsky. Again, albeit it was brief, she won the scramble, she got out of it, but still against a better grappler, she might not have, and nearly against Jian Kim as well. So it's a concern. Like, I just think that Andrea's like technique as a wrestler is a bit better. I think that if there is top control to be had, I think it would more than likely come from Andrea. I think that she's a better scrambler. Like, when you actually see Andrea taken down, she doesn't get up right away all the time, but she doesn't get, say, controlled for the rest of the round. Whereas Antonina against Caitlin Chikagan specifically, and even parts of the Roxanne Modafferi fight, she just got taken down and controlled for very large stretches there. Again, I think she's working on it. I mean, she's a BJJ brown belt. Like, I don't think she's a downright bad grappler, but like, the takedown defense, she was taken down easily, of course, as well by Lucia Pudilova. She had a guard pass by Pudilova as well. I think that if there is a fighter more likely to have success landing takedowns, getting top control, it would actually be Andrea Lee here. So that's how I assess fights. Like, if I think the fight is very close in the stand-up, and I think that's the case here, I think they're both good technically. Even if I favor Antonina technically is a better striker, I think that Andrea could maybe make up for it with her pace and her volume. But then Andrea, if I think Andrea is the better wrestler and better top control grappler, then that does it a bit more for me in terms of the percentages. Again, I'm not saying this isn't a competitive fight. I think it's a very competitive fight, but that's how I handicap fights. I want to side with the fighter that has more clear paths to victory. And I personally think that that's Andrea Lee here. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's okay. It's just a prediction. I don't get offended by it, but that's where I'm coming from. Again, I understand the hesitation that, some people in the community maybe have backing a fighter coming off losses, but it's one thing, like, if a fighter's like on a losing streak and they're just like not looking competitive at all, they're just getting blown out, that would be a concern. But in the case of Andrea, like, to her credit, she lost 2 split decisions in there, to Lauren Murphy, to Joanne Calderwood. And again, I know people live after both of those fights, and even still to this day, think that she won the fight. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but they were definitely very respectful showings by Andrea to say, like, hey, she was competitive in these fights. She had a good effort, like, even though the judges maybe didn't see it for her. Even the Roxanne Modafferi fight to an extent. Again, I get it. She should have beat Roxanne on paper. She was a big favorite there. I even better there. I'll own that. But at least the fight was relatively competitive. It wasn't the best showing by Andrea, but she didn't look bad. Like, she didn't look just like she was, at the end of her career or anything like that. So again, I understand the hesitation with Andrea, but I actually do think that as the fighter with more paths to victory, her chances to win are a bit better than Antonina's here. Although Antonina, again, is a very talented fighter, I think this is a very competitive fight. Mike Grundy and Lando Vannata. Lando Vannata moving down to featherweight here, which is pretty interesting, I will say, because, and I actually think it's a decent move by him, because I've always kind of thought he's a bit undersized for lightweight. I mean, he wasn't a tiny lightweight, but I do think that, moving down, it could potentially help him a bit more from a physicality perspective. Maybe it helps him just get a bit more fired up, like his motivation, maybe his training regimen changes. Maybe he's all of a sudden a changed fighter or something like that, just fights a bit more composed and disciplined. But it's still something that I'd like to see before making an assessment. I mean, again, I like that on Instagram. He says the cut's going well for him. He's in great shape and all that. That's great to hear. But I really want to see Lando Vannata have like a complete performance before, say, maybe I bet him in a spot. He's always been a guy that has shown a ton of potential, especially in round one. He always has, not always, but a lot of the times he has a strong round one. He hurt Bobby Green in round one of their first fight, not the rematch, but the first fight, he hurt him. He hurt Matt Favola badly. He rocked Tony Ferguson badly. He knocked out John McDessie in round one. This is like Lando Vannata's MO. He's got a super strong round one. because he's a great athlete. He's a capable striker. He could switch stances on you. His 1-2 combo is sharp. He's a varied striker. He'll work the legs. He'll work the body. He'll work the head. He has fast hands. He counters well. He's got good footwork and mobility. And in terms of like the craftiness of his strikes, he's got a front kick, a push kick, and good combinations overall. But the issue with Lando's game is just after that round one, the cardio is just spent. I mean, that's what it is, right? The cardio gets spent, and then all the technical acumen and all the scrambling ability that he's shown, despite getting taken out early, getting off of his back, has just diminished. I mean, significantly. I mean, it's been an issue with him throughout his whole career. Just comes out super hot and just slows down as the fight progresses because he just has such an explosive athletic style. We're throwing like all these like wheel kicks. I mean, he's gotten a better job of like limiting how many wheel kicks he throws, but I think he wheel kicked John McDessie in his second, fight in the UFC and just fell in love with the wheel kick. And again, it shows me maturity that he's done it less, but he just has a high energy style, which in turn taxes his cardio. It makes him more hittable as the fight goes. I mean, his striking defense isn't ideal to begin with. Head doesn't move off the center line. In turn, he got rocked. I mean, he's just so willing to like absorb punishment. I mean, he's just like such confidence in his chin. We saw that in his debut against Tony Ferguson. He was rocked by Bobby Green in the first and second fight. He was rocked by Matt Frevola. So while his chin is shown to be good, he still has shown that he could be hurt. Another issue with Lando is his fight IQ. I mean, he illegally kneed Bobby Green in the first fight. Just, again, going back to like how he expends so much energy early on, it's just like he just doesn't have anything left as the fight goes. I mean, looking at the fact that Lando Vannata has more performance bonuses than he does wins in the UFC really tells me the type of fighter he is. I mean, he's just a guy that, again, he stays with the promotion because, again, he has won some fights and he is very talented, but he puts on fight of the night type performances. He's won a lot of performance bonuses. He's an exciting fighter. The Bobby Green, rematch, you could say both fights, they both won fight of the night. So for the guy's issues in terms of his IQ and cardio, he also doesn't check low kicks, which cost him his fights against Drakkar Klose and Mark Giacchese. But, to the guy's credit, again, he is talented when he's on and when he's focused and he has gas in the tank. But again, it just, that only lasts. The history has shown that only lasts for a few minutes. Again, it was nice to see that against Medeiros, he did it for 15 minutes. I mean, he was fighting in front of his home crowd in New Mexico, so he had a bit more motivation there, and he showed to fight at a high pace for 3 rounds. But I would like to see a bit more consistency out of Vannata before, again, I say bet him. I do think this is a winnable matchup for him. I think that he's a much better striker here than Grundy. I mean, Grundy on the feet, he's just pretty rudimentary and stiff. I mean, I like that he trains with Darren Till. Geez, Tim, where am I getting Tim from? Darren Till and Tom Aspinall, two obviously very tremendous fighters at Team Cabone, I believe is how you pronounce it. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, but in Liverpool. But his striking, I'd say, is still rudimentary and stiff. He doesn't lead with a jab. He'll lead with like a left hand, an uppercut, or a hook. He doesn't throw kicks like at all. So while on paper, like him and his camp might strategize, like, yeah, let's throw low kicks at Lando. Like, he's shown susceptibility to them in the past. Like, Grundy still doesn't throw kicks. So again, it's possible that maybe all of a sudden he does, but I'm not like counting on him to. I think that more than likely, Grundy's going to have to mix in some takedowns here because on the feet, honestly, I think he could be kind of a sitting duck early. I don't like have a lot of trust in his defense. Like, head doesn't move off the center line much. He's just very heavy on his lead leg. I actually think that Lando could have some success with low kicks. And everybody remembers, including me, when he knocked out Narimani at the end, towards the end of round 2 in his debut. But literally seconds before that, maybe about 30 seconds to a minute before he knocked out Narimani, he was rocked badly himself. I mean, he was almost knocked out. I mean, like it was one of those, like, he was so rocked, like one more punch could have put him out. He was also rocked by Ivleyev as well. So I think that Lando's got enough power. He's got enough power. I think he's just a much better striker. He's more technical. He's more varied. I think he's sharper as well, but I think he's going to be a real threat to Grundy. But Grundy's path to victory is to land those takedowns. He is an Olympic freestyle wrestler, 2014 Commonwealth Games. And I do think he's got good MMA wrestling, does Grundy. He's got a good level change, ability to chain wrestle. He's got a good reactive takedown. And what I liked about him in that Evloev fight, I know he was largely unsuccessful taking Evloev down, but I applauded his willingness to just keep going to the takedown. Like, he knew he was getting outstruck on the feet, and he was willing to attempt 15 takedowns against Evloev. Like, which shows me, like, yeah, he's super resilient. Like, he didn't go in there and fight with a massive ego. You know, he knew what he needed to do. It just didn't work out. And if he goes out there and attempts several takedowns on Lando, I think he could use that to tire Lando out. I don't think Grundy has great cardio, but I favor his cardio more in a 3-round fight just because of his willingness to wrestle more. I think it'll be tough for Grundy to take down and control Lando early because Lando is a decent wrestler himself. Actually was an NCAA Division I wrestler only for a semester. He's a good athlete as Lando, and he could scramble well. He's also BJJ brown belt as Lando. But as the fight kind of goes on, I think the early takedown attempts for Grundy could pay dividends and help him win the later rounds. I'm not saying that's a guaranteed thing, but I think that's what he could look to do to win down the stretch. I also think that Grundy's a solid grappler in top position. He's a BJJ purple belt. He's actually a European no-gi champion, won gold medal there as a blue belt. He also looks to advance position in the top position. He's also got the ability to threaten with submissions from the front headlock position. So Grundy is certainly a very capable wrestler and grappler. I'm not doubting him there. I have my concerns for Grundy while the fight is standing, especially early. I just feel like Lando's going to be such a threat to him standing that I think, honestly, Lando could just knock him out, even though on paper Grundy's never been knocked out. I get it. But when you just go back on tape and see him rocked, especially in the Narimani fight, I mean, Narimani's a guy that, you know, he hasn't really shown power before that fight or after. I mean, Narimani doesn't have a single win by knockout on his resume, and he was able to rock Grundy bad. So I think Lando's the bigger finishing threat here. I mean, again, I don't think Grundy can't finish Lando, but I think that Vannata is the bigger finishing threat here, especially early. I think he's a much better striker. I think he is going to be a bit faster, at least while fresh. And I favor his volume as well down the stretch. I just think that Grundy's path to victory here, get some takedowns, get some top control. I could see it happening, but I think that the fighter that's going to be doing more damage here over the course of 3 rounds is Lando Vannata. So he's going to be my pick to win. But again, I would like to preface that, close rather with that prediction by saying it's not as if I can't see Grundy winning. I laid out a path to victory for him. He's got takedown upside. He's got the ability to wear Lando out. I think Grundy does have the better cardio. So again, it's not as if I can't see Grundy winning. And Lando, kind of like Luke Sanders from a couple of cards ago, Lando is a guy that, you know, he has been put in favorable stylistic matchups on paper in the past and has still lost them. You know, or not lost, but the Frivola fight, for instance, you know, Frivola is a guy that just doesn't have good striking. He's easy to hurt. Vannata did hurt him, but just the fight IQ, the lack of finishing instinct, his willingness to slow down as the fight progressed, you know, Frivola's willingness to go for the takedowns, tire him out was what, you know, drew the fight rather. So, and even against Tony Ferguson, right? I mean, he rocked Ferguson bad, could have won that fight, but just, again, there's been matchups where Lando has success early on, but then he can't finish strong. He can't win rounds 2 and 3. And as a result, he either draws with the opposition or loses. So, again, he's my prediction, but like I said, it's not as if I can't see Grundy winning. I'm not counting Grundy out by any means. Jacare Souza and Andre Muniz, interesting fight. So like I get, it's one of those fights where, like, yeah, sure, if these guys fought, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, it's Jacare Souza all day. This is a good matchup for him. Just like the Kevin Holland fight on paper was a great stylistic matchup for Souza if it took place 6 years ago. The problem for that was it didn't take place 6 years ago. It took place in 2020. And Kevin Holland, who we've seen in 2 consecutive fights get put on his back and controlled for 30 straight minutes, essentially, was able to knock Souza out from guard. Right? So, again, on paper, Souza is a better grappler here. He's a judo black belt. I think he's actually a better striker on paper. I think he's a bit more technical. He hits harder. He's a better top control grappler, 4th degree black belt. I mean, Muniz is a very good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner himself. But, like, on paper, for a prime Jacare Souza, he absolutely wins this fight, just like he wins the Kevin Holland fight in his prime. But that's not what we're working with right now, and I'm just not going to fall into that trap. I mean, I've done it in the past as well, where, like, I almost, like, not ignore, but don't place as much emphasis on, like, fighters that are seemingly at the end of their careers, and it's just a matter of guessing how regressed they are. And I mean, you never know with like some of these older fighters. I mean, they could easily get old overnight. I mean, not to say that happens every night. I mean, every time. I mean, obviously guys like Yoel Romero and Francisco Trinaldo, in the early 40s are still winning fights, but like it's still a concern nonetheless in general. I mean, you typically, like, how many fighters do you see in the UFC just consistently win fights in their late 30s and early 40s? I mean, again, I named Trinaldo and Romero, but like beyond that, who? So that's my huge concern for Souza, because it's a good matchup for him on paper, but he's 41 now. He's coming off a knockout loss to Kevin Holland, and just like he gassed a minute and 30 seconds into that fight. I mean, you could even go back on tape. He was breathing heavily on top of Holland, and Holland was able to land those ground strikes and put him out cold. And I had a lot of concerns about Jacare's success as a wrestler recently. I mean, again, I know he took down Holland, but Holland got right back up because Souza didn't settle in top position. This is going back, a few fights now. I mean, again, against Kelvin Gastelum, a fighter that he's much bigger than, went 1 for 9 on takedowns. He's just been very unsuccessful at landing them. It didn't go for takedowns against Jack Hermanson, when on paper that seemed like a viable path to victory for Jacare as a better submission grappler. But just, he's 41 now. He's coming off a knockout loss. He's been fighting for so long. You just don't know the motivation of him. So, like, while on paper it's a good matchup for him, I actually am going to side with Muniz, not because I think he is more proven or, if they're in their primes, he beats them, but he's, for 10 years younger. He's got 6 inches of reach. I think he's going to be the hungrier fighter here, more motivated. I don't like Muniz's willingness to just play on his back and lay in guard. Part of it is because his cardio isn't good. He was actually very tired against Arroyo in his debut, a fight that wasn't really fought at a high pace. So his cardio is definitely very suspect as Muniz. He's also got suspect takedown defense. He was taken down easily from a trip on the Contender Series, also taken down by Arroyo. I'd say his striking is fairly labored. He also backs straight up into the fence and struggles to separate from the opposition when they shoot in on him. So, like, if Jacare is able to close his distance, I think he can take Muniz down, but like, and earn some top control. But like, I don't know what he's going to do beyond that. Again, maybe like Muniz just gasses so hard that just the finish maybe happens out of nowhere. Or but again, Souza didn't show the best cardio last fight either, so I kind of question that as well. But I'm just going to side with the guy that is much closer to his prime. I mean, again, I typically pick fighters that I think the stylistic matchup it favors them, but I picked against Souza last time against Holland because of that reason, because Holland was just much closer to his prime, hungrier. Souza had the bout cancellation in there with Uriah Hall due to COVID, just hasn't been very active generally. I mean, again, I know he fought Holland, but it only went like a minute and 30 seconds. And before the Holland fight, it was a decision loss to Jan Blachowicz back in November of 2019, which on paper, it looked like it aged well, going to a split decision with Jan, but like, there wasn't really a whole lot going on there. He landed 20 significant strikes, and just his success was just holding Jan in the clinch. So despite, again, some recent wins recently from Souza, he hasn't exactly looked that good in them. Against Chris Weidman, he was getting boxed up for like 2.5 rounds basically, and then he knocks Weidman out after Weidman gasped, struggled to control the range, and was able to put him out there in round 3. He got a quick knockout against Derek Brunson. That was probably his last good performance, was against Derek Brunson in January of 2018. So, I mean, you just look at like the resume, and again, I know Souza has given so much to this sport. He's going to go down as one of the best fighters to ever do it. But just like, look at this. I mean, he was at one point 24-4, but since then, he's won 2 fights and lost 5 of them. I struggle to count because of the cancellations in there, but 5 of them. He's been 2-5. So it's a clear regression. It's just kind of like Donald Cerrone last week, right? Again, it's like I picked him there and I was wrong, and because I thought stylistically he was the better fighter, but just durability is one of those things. Like once it goes, it's tough to win fights. It is just like cardio earlier. It is one of the arguably the most important thing to winning a fight, because you could be just a flawless fighter, just winning the fight from start to almost finish, but at any point the opposition could just get a knockout shot. So that's my hesitation with backing Souza. I just think that Muniz younger, more motivated, got some reach. I think he can knock Souza out. He's got some power, does Muniz. And And I think he's a good enough of a submission grappler to kind of avoid anything from Souza on the ground. So Muniz is going to be my pick. Matt Schnell and Rogerio Bontorin. So two flyweights that are actually going to be fighting at bantamweight. Interestingly enough, potentially it helps with Bontorin's durability, and we're on that in a moment, but it also could help Schnell's durability, a guy that's been rocked in the past as well. So it's pretty interesting that these two got booked up with each other, because it was originally supposed to be, let me just fact check myself. I think it was supposed to be Matt Schnell and maybe Alex Perez. Alex Perez and Matt Schnell. But I guess the short notice makes sense. Like if Bontorin, for whatever reason, couldn't make the weight, he's very stocky for the weight class, very strong. He's a power-based fighter, is Bontorin. He's just very powerful and explosive. He's a BJJ black belt, a Brazilian state national champion. Again, those power takedowns, not the best technical wrestler, but his physicality is able to win him some of these grappling exchanges. We saw him take down Holly and Paiva a few times. Struggled to control him on the ground, but was even grappling with Magomed Bibulatov, a fighter who is no longer with the UFC, but a very talented fighter. Split decision or not, I thought it was a good performance by Bontorin. I just like his aggressiveness on the ground. He'll look to pass your guards, to get both hooks, and look for the submission. And that's what I think he's best at. And I do think he can take down Schnell. I don't think Schnell's a good wrestler. Schnell's also willing to pull guard. Schnell's done a better job of working up from bottom, recently at least, against Alexander Pantoja. He does a good job of like not giving up his back. He'll scramble off of his back. But I think that if Bontorin wants to put Schnell on his back, he probably could, and maybe even hurt him. I mean, Schnell was knocked out by grounded pound from Hector Sandoval. He was also knocked out by Rob Font. He also took some hard, clean shots from Alexandria Pantoja, which didn't knock him out, but it seemed to daze him a bit. So I think that Bontorin's path to victory is, well, in theory, he could land a big punch on the feet. Again, Schnell, he's defensively sound and fast, but again, he's just been rocked and hurt so many times. I wouldn't be, surprised to see Bontorin knock him out with a big shot, but he's not a good technical striker as Bontorin. He just throws like a lot of like looping shots. His head is on the center line. If you're a stats guy, his striking defense is 38%. He was knocked out cold by Kai France. Wide open to counters. His defense is poor, and he was nearly knocked out on the Contender Series as well. So that, like, I think on the feet, Schnell could probably pick him apart, assuming his durability holds up. And assuming he's not willing to brawl in the pocket. That's another tendency I noticed with Schnell, like against Pantoja. He just sort of, like, both of them really just came out like a storm and just, were willing to recklessly brawl with one another, just not really care about defense. And eventually it tapered down, but like, I would like to see a bit more composure out of Schnell, but he did show that against Tyson Nam. That was actually a very good performance out of him. I know on paper it was a split decision. It was a fairly competitive fight, but he showed fast hands there. He's always shown good boxing, has Schnell, the ability to counter, good combinations. He feints well. He's got good footwork. He'll circle to the non-power side. He utilizes some leg kicks as well. He's a good technical striker. So black belt in karate, he's got a body lock takedown, but like I said, he's not a guy that has had a lot of success landing takedowns in the UFC. I think that mainly he is a boxer, and I'd say he's very good at it. He's also BJJ or purple belt. So even if I think that Bontorin could take him down, I think he'll struggle to pass Schnell's guard. Pantoja struggled to pass Schnell's guard. Pantoja actually let him up, but didn't really want to tangle too much on the ground with him. Not that he was going to get subbed, but I think that Pantoja rather saw that he wasn't going to get a lot done, and had a lot of respect for Schnell's ground game there. So that's what the fight comes down to. I think that while standing, Schnell could box him up. Maybe he brawls and gets knocked out, but assuming he stays composed, I think he's just going to be faster. I think he's more technical. I think he's more defensively sound, and who knows? Maybe he can knock out Bontorin. I know that Schnell doesn't have a ton of knockouts on his resume, but he did rock Pantoja, and Pantoja is generally durable. I know he doesn't have a lot of knockouts on his resume, as we could see here, but Bontorin's striking defense is so poor, and Kai France isn't exactly a power puncher either. So I'm not putting it past Schnell, but I think that more than likely he would get a decision victory on the feet. But Bontorin, again, it's a close fight because in theory he's the better grappler, better wrestler. That is, he could land takedowns. Maybe he could have some success on the ground, but I think that the fighter that's going to be doing more damage over the course of 15 minutes, the fighter whose output I trust a bit more, whose cardio I trust a bit more, is Matt Schnell, and that's ultimately going to be my pick. But like we touched on just last fight, durability is very important. Schnell has been knocked out more than once. In theory, Bontarine can knock him out too, even though I don't, he hasn't shown to be a great technical striker. All right. Second fight on the main card, Shane Burgos and Edson Barboza. So I'm actually going to peep the comment section here. Grateful Dude. What's up, Grateful Dude? Daniel, I like the under 2.5 in this one. Oh, I'm sorry, man. I missed you. You said that at 6:05. Oh, you actually just said it. Okay, so you said it on the Schnell fight. Look at that timing, man. I love it. Okay, so you like the under there. Okay. Let's take a look at those odds, man. Let's see what we got. Plus 100 over there on 5 dimes, minus 105. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I could see it. I wish you the best of luck on that prop. I'm going to be sitting that one out, but yeah, it has the potential to be a real banger, man. So I hope it comes through for you. So as we were talking about here, we've got Burgos and Barboza taking place at featherweight. Of course, both of these guys are really large for featherweight. Burgos has always been a guy that has fought at featherweight, and everybody kind of acknowledged his frame being big. But Barboza, a former lightweight, dropping down to 145 pounds. I know that the cut for either guy has got to be really tough, but they do it. They've done it every time they fought. And I do think that we get a striker battle here because historically both have shown good takedown defense. Specifically, I know Barboza has been taken out and controlled by, guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov, Kevin Lee, very strong wrestlers. I don't think he has to worry about that here because Burgos just hasn't shown the willingness to wrestle. Like, let's just look at Burgos's, as we float past his Tapology picture there. 0.3 takedowns per 15 minutes. Just hasn't landed a takedown since since Scott Alfredo Pepe. He's a striker. So in theory, Barboza's going to get a fight that he wants, a guy that wants to stand with him. And Barboza is a very good striker, as we know by now. He's just very experienced as a striker. He's a black belt in Taekwondo. He's also got very good leg kicks. He's notorious for those hard leg kicks. He's also got some power in his hands. He's a good technical striker. He feints often. And so Barboza is a real threat on the feet with his just diverse set of attacks, his power, his technique. But I think that Burgos could give him some trouble here with the pace and the pressure that he brings. That is what Burgos is. He's a pressure striker. He's a guy that is willing to walk forward, even if he gets hurt in fights like we just saw against Josh Emmett, for 15 minutes and just not stop. He's got very good cardio. He's willing to walk forward, throw in high volume, does Burgos. They both have some power, so in theory, either guy could hurt the other. But I do think that Burgos has a higher pace, a higher work rate. He's got some decent variety as well. Orthodox striker is Burgos. He could throw in combination. He's got some fast hands. He's got a solid shin. He's been hurt in the past, like against Halabaugh, Emmett, as we could see here, and Cater. But he's tough to actually put out. But I still do think it's possible for Barboza to rock him because, Burgos he's just so hittable and everything. I mean, before the Josh Emmett fight, Josh Emmett had only landed 87 significant strikes in a 15-minute fight. When he fought Shane Burgos, he landed 128 or 27, one of those two. So just Shane's willingness to absorb damage. Again, he is so durable, but just his willingness to absorb damage could maybe mean that if the fight goes 15 minutes against another capable striker, say a Cub Swanson type, he can maybe, lose a split decision or, go to split decision when maybe he could win a bit more clear in theory if he wasn't, as willing to take as much damage as he does. He's just willing to kind of walk forward with his hands down. I mean, again, he does have good head movement. And he has done a better job of keeping his hands up as of late, but he still doesn't have great striking defense to Shane. So I think that's going to be the dynamic of the fight. I think that while these two are in open space, I think Barboza's can have success with those kicks. But once Shane closes that distance, I think that'll be Barboza landing those kicks with less frequency just because he won't have as much room to throw them, kind of like the Justin Gaethje fight to a certain extent. Just Shane's going to force the pocket exchanges, and Barboza's going to be a bit more vulnerable there. But again, Barboza does have underrated boxing. He's got some power. He hurt Danny Ige. So I want to put it past Barboza to hurt Shane with his hands. But it's just going to be a firefight. And I tend to side with Burgos just a bit more because I think his cardio is a bit better. I think his, the MO of him just being a pressure striker, that has been the type of guy that has given Barboza trouble in the past, a la Justin Gaethje. Shane does check low kicks, which I like in this matchup specifically. He also throws low kicks of his own. So Barboza standing heavy on his lead leg. I don't be all too surprised if Shane, lands some on him. It maybe doesn't cripple his leg, but just, peppers him in, things like that. What I'm trying to say is I don't think it's exactly going to be one-way traffic with Barboza's leg kicks, although it could be in theory. So I like Burgos a bit more. Again, I am nervous about him just being so hittable and everything. And, he's coming off a fight where he took a lot of damage. And I like the fact that he took a lot of time off in between the Emmett fight now. As we could see here, the last time he fought was that Josh Emmett fight back in June of last year. So it's been about a year off. So that's nice to see. But again, I have hesitations with Burgos. It's going to be, I think, a fight where it's going to come down to who lands more damage, who's going to be the fresher fighter down the stretch, and who avoids getting finished, right? Because I think in theory, a finish either way could happen here. I think they're both capable of hurting one another. And even Shane's capable of not just knocking Barboza out cold, but just kind of wearing him down with just the pace and the volume, kind of like how he did against Makwan Americani. So slight lean with Burgos, but I agree with the odds being competitive. I think it's a very fun fight. I think that's probably the popular fight for pick for fight of the night. Viviane Araujo taking on Katlyn Chookagian. So another fascinating fight. I think Chookagian excels as a striker. We know that by now. She's a point striker on the outside. She utilizes leg kicks. She wants to utilize her length on the outside and basically point fight. Like I said, she throws good combinations. She's got solid footwork. She does a lot of circling to maintain range. And she's at her best when she's in a rhythm, is Katlyn. She's also a strong submission grappler as well. I believe she's a brown belt or black belt or Renzo Gracie. My notes say brown belt, but I feel like she's been upgraded recently. I'm gonna have to fact check myself about that, but regardless, she's a good submission grappler. Her guard is generally hard to pass. I know that she got her guard passed by Valentina and then finished there, but Valentina, as we just saw in her last fight against Jessica Andrade, she's just so dominant from top position and everything. It's kind of like the norm, right? Like if you get taken down and dominated by Valentina, it's just kind of normal, right? There's nothing to be ashamed of there, not at all. But again, Katlyn does threaten off her back from her back a bit. Leg locks, arm bars, triangle attempts. She's got several Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu matches. She's good at reclaiming guard as Katlyn. And she's just, to my earlier point, allowed very few grappling advances in the UFC. I don't think she's like a flawed fighter at all as Katlyn. But the hindrance in her game, well, there's been a couple, but one in particular has been her takedown defense. And I'm not the only one to point this out. But she's been taken down several times by Joanne Calderwood 3 times, taken down by Jennifer Maia, taken down by Valentina a few times. Again, it's not a bad look or anything, but I'm just saying it adds more to the takedown statistics. She was dragged down easily from a body lock by Andrade, another strong fighter. And she's also shown vulnerability to leg kicks as Katlyn. She doesn't check them. Jennifer Maia had success kicking her leg. Valentina Shevchenko did. Joanne Calderwood, if you want stats specifically, went 69, nice, of 87 leg kicks landed. So I think that Viviane could have success landing those low kicks, to be honest. She does train at Sanford MMA, right? That's a very good camp that they come in prepared. And we just see fighters, like what I was talking about earlier with like the Glory MMA camp, they just look significantly better fight to fight. Like, let's look at Phil Hawes last week. Everybody was talking about, me included, questioning his cardio, past 7.5 minutes, what happens from then on out. But he showed he could fight a hard 15 minutes. It wasn't just like the Imavov fight. Like I know some people looked at that as like, yeah, he went 15 minutes with Imavov, and I definitely viewed that as a positive, but he still slowed down in that fight. He still got rocked. But why I was more impressed with the Daukaus fight was he actually fought a hard 15 minutes. He actually showed good cardio, dare I say. He actually showed to be the fresher fighter than Daukaus down the stretch, right? So Vivi, she trains at that same camp. That's also a camp that features Michael Chandler, Derek Brunson, Gilbert Burns, a tremendous amount of talent, just to name a few. So she's going to come in prepared, I think. I wouldn't be surprised to see her throw those low kicks. I also think that she could maybe best Katlyn on the feet. I do think that Vivi moves a bit better. Again, I think that Caitlin has good movement overall, good technical movement, but I think in terms of like Araujo's athleticism and speed, I think that's going to be a bit better. She's also got good footwork herself. I also think Araujo hits a bit harder, and she's a good technical striker herself. So again, I see this as kind of 50-50-ish on the feet. They're both, again, very good. Viviani specifically, she could switch stances, great footwork while she's fresh, combination striking ability. She throws fast strikes. She utilizes feints. She varies her attack as well, but her hindrance has been her cardio. And it's gotten better recently. She hasn't gassed as bad in these last few fights against De La Rosa and Roxanne Modafferi. But she still slowed down in that fight. She slowed down specifically in round 3 against Roxanne. Roxanne had a bit more success landing on her. And then even going back to like the Alexis Davis fight, she got tired in round 2 there. Round 2, not round 3. It was controlled for the latter half of round 2 on bottom position. So even against Talita Bernardo, she was taken down to round 2 there. So again, I like that she's improving, and I think that part of it is like give credit where credit is due. It's her recognizing where she needs to get better. It's her camping helping her out, and it's gotten better. But I still don't think that she has very strong 15-minute cardio. Again, I admire her pace and her movement, but I think at times her excessive movement comes to the detriment of her cardio. She's gotten better at being more strategic and smart with her movement, so it doesn't tax her cardio as much, but it still gets her a bit tired in say round 3 here. So I do think that Caitlin, her cardio could hold up a bit better, but on the flip side, we got Araujo. I think she's got more takedown upside here. Again, based on the grappling credentials of Caitlin that we talked about, I don't think that Araujo's just going to take her down and dominate her, like pass her guard or anything like that. But, can she take Caitlin down? Can she get some top control? Sure. Yeah. I mean, Araujo's the BJJ black belt. She's got good clinch instincts. She's very strong in the clinch. In addition to being a good athlete, she's a solid scrambler, but then there's other times where she's just not really willing to play around on the ground. There's been opportunities for her to, take advantage, get in an advantageous position on the ground, and she'll just totally pass on it, like against Talita Bernardo. So Bernardo was actually welcoming top control there, and Araujo was not engaging. So even though she's got that, why I put that out, even though Araujo in theory has more takedown upside, she might not choose to go there, maybe just because she's feeling she's winning the striking. And while objectively that could be true, the judges might not see that, and we could see Caitlin here eke out another decision, unanimous or split. But I do think that Viviani is more likely to win. Again, better athlete. I think she hits a bit harder. I think they're both good strikers overall with good movement, good technical movement. I just think that Viviani's going to move a bit better in terms of just her overall evasiveness. And like I said, even though I don't think there's a lot of like conviction in my take about her landing takedowns. Maybe she could go to that. She's the fighter with more upside in landing takedowns. So that's why I'm going to pick Viviani Araujo. Co-main event, we got Tony Ferguson and Beneil Dariush. Interesting fight. It kind of reminds me a bit of the Souza and Muniz fight. Not exactly, but kind of. And, we got a fighter here, Tony Ferguson, who, again, has always been at the top of the heap of the division. Former title holder, interim title holder, that is, when he beat Kevin Lee back at UFC 216. But now he's 37. He's taken more damage. He's always a guy that has notoriously had a great chin. He still actually hasn't officially been knocked out cold, but he took a bunch of damage from Gaethje. I mean, that was a bad beating there. He got TKO'd there. Just he couldn't see out of his eyes. One of the most one-sided beatings in MMA history for 5 rounds. And then the following fight against Charles Oliveira, it was a great performance by Oliveira. We'll get into him in the next fight, but Tony just. He's always been a guy that has been, proficient in scrambles, been able to get up off of his back from bottom position and even from strong top control grapplers, but he just couldn't work back up to his feet against Oliveira. And again, I'm not taking anything away from Oliveira. That is a great win. He had a great dominant performance there. And he is a guy that showed a layer to his game that we didn't get to see in the past. But I didn't like how Tony just didn't really, there was a couple of sequences where he could have worked back up to his feet, but just generally, Oliveira was able to largely land a takedown in the round and just ride out top control. Almost submitted Tony there at the end of round 1. So I got to really question where Tony's at, because at one point he was just on a tremendous winning streak, as we could see here, beating some very talented fighters. Josh Thompson comes to mind, Edson Barboza, who we just talked about. We talked about Lando Vannata earlier, Rafael Dos Anjos, Kevin Lee, Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone. Some of you right now might see those names and go like, these guys are at the end of their careers. At the time, these were very good wins, is what I'm trying to say. And they still are to this day. These guys are veterans, but I'm just trying to place more emphasis on the fact that when Tony Ferguson went out there and beat these guys, it was a huge deal. It really was. And so, like, yeah, with Tony, I think if he keeps the fight upright, he can maybe win. He's never been a great technical striker, but how he wins fights typically is by just wearing guys down with his unorthodox movement and, pace. His volume and his cardio has always been excellent. He's proven to go out there, land close to 200 significant strikes at Mexico City altitude, which is higher than Denver, Colorado altitude. So very high. You got to have excellent cardio to do that. Against Rafael Dos Anjos, of all people, another guy with good cardio. Tony could switch stances. He moves in various awkward directions. He could check low kicks, although he still had that unfortunate surgery on his left leg after the whole Khabib incident back in, Khabib fight incidents, when they're supposed to fight. One of the times they were supposed to fight back at, I believe it was UFC 220, if I'm not mistaken, the Brooklyn card. But yeah, a huge injury there for Tony. He bounced back. He got wins over Pettis and Cerrone in the meantime, but it's still damage taken nonetheless. He's a pressure striker, as Tony. He utilizes a jab. He'll have about a 4-inch reach advantage here. Like I said, the unorthodox attacks, specifically what I mean, spinning elbow, step in elbow, utilizes a lot of false starts, things like that. But, even though on paper he's a guy that has given a lot of guys trouble with that pace, with that volume and cardio, it's just been unfortunate, because if Beneil Dariush is able to get this fight to the ground and put Tony on his back, all that pace and cardio stuff just goes out the window with my analysis. Tony will not have any chance to or not any chance, but a lot of chances to really put it on Dariush if he's on his back, just like he didn't against Charles Oliveira, right? Because I actually bet Tony there, and I'll own it. I bet Tony Ferguson against Charles Oliveira because I thought he was going to, maybe get taken down, but he'd find his way back to the feet and wear Oliveira down with his pace, pressure, and volume. But just Oliveira, a guy who I've never been sold on his cardio, and we'll get into that more in the main event, but was able to, on paper, he had the inferior cardio, did Oliveira, but it didn't matter because he was able to take down Tony and just ride out top control for 3 rounds. And that could be what happens here. Beneil Dariush is a very good submission grappler. A BJJ black belt has competed and outside the octagon competition. He sinks in the hooks that presented the back. Good guard passer in top position. He took Thiago Moises' back, a BJJ black belt, body triangle for back control. Very positionally aware in grappling transitions is Dariush. We saw that in the Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, the rematch that is. Solid double A takedown does Benny have. He's got a smothering game in the clinch as well. We could utilize body lock takedowns. And so, again, I know that Oliveira is a deceivingly very strong guy. I know he's got a long and lanky frame, but he was able to largely pick up and throw down Tony. I don't know that Dariush has that same physicality, but even beyond the Oliveira matchup, we still saw, Ferguson taken down. He was taken down briefly by Donald Cerrone. And there's even Kevin Lee comes to mind. I don't think Dariush is as strong of a wrestler as Kevin Lee, but there's still, as in Barboza took him down, there is still some potential for Dariush to land takedowns here, I think. And if he gets Tony down, and there's just a very reasonable chance that, that's the round. Dariush is able to ride out top control. He's able to maybe not submit Tony, but again, ride out top control. And when there's not a whole lot else going on in the round and the judges see that, they're going to favor Dariush in all likelihood. So that's what it comes down to. If Tony stays off of his back, I think he could win the fight on the feet. I think his cardio is better. I think his pace is better. I think he's, potentially more durable of the two, but it's just going to come down to, can he, how much does he have left in the tank, and can he get up after being taken down? And I'm not doubting Dariush on the feet, though. He's a black belt in Muay Thai, southpaw striker. He's got a hard body kick, a jab, an overhand left. He's got some power as well. A nice 1-2 combo does Dariush have, a high kick, and he is just a real threat standing, even to guys that are durable, like Drakkar Klose, for instance. Drakkar Klose had not been knocked out prior to the Dariush fight. So And Tony's been rocked a bunch, and now he's taken even more damage since, he took a lot of damage against Gaethje. We didn't really get to see his chin tested against Oliveira. So I think that Dariush could win by knockout on the feet, but I actually think that if the fight plays out for 15 minutes, I would favor Tony there just because longer, more pace, more pressure. But I'm going to side with Dariush here just because I just think he's much closer to his prime. Again, like I said, I think that he, in theory, has the wrestling advantage. Therefore, he should be able to control where the fight goes. And I tend to side with those fighters. So you got one guy's arrow who's pointing up, and Dariush Ferguson's arrow is seemingly pointing down. I'm going to side with Beneil Dariush here. It's tough. It's tough for me to say because, again, on paper, I think that if this was prime both guys, I think Ferguson would win. I'd look at betting him as an underdog, but that's just not what we're getting here. That's why it's just a complete pass for me from a betting perspective. So again, I'm not trying to say that everybody that had bets on Dariush, again, I wish you guys the best. I'm not saying that I don't want you to cash or anything, but I'm just trying to justify why I don't want to bet him at this line. I know some of you out there got him at a line and you got some closing line value, which is obviously nice. I'm going to personally sit back and enjoy it. We'll see how it goes. We got the main event, Chandler and Oliveira, which is also the 12th fight on the card. We got a very close fight. It's been very similar on the betting odds all week, minus 130-ish for Oliveira, depending on what book you look at. They come back on Chandler, plus 115, plus 110 in that range. And I agree with the fight being very close. I think that Chandler's a better athlete. I think he's definitely more explosive while early. I think he has more punching power, and I think he's a better wrestler, and he's also stronger. So in theory, he should be able to control where the fight goes. I think he could have some success like Kevin Lee did. I mean, Kevin Lee, I know he got submitted by Oliveira, but largely in those first two rounds, Lee was able to ride out top control of scramble out of the submissions from Oliveira and, essentially win the first two rounds by being on top. And I think that Chandler could do the same, kind of outmuscle Oliveira. Like I said in the previous breakdown, I think that Oliveira is strong, deceivingly strong, but I think that Chandler's a bit stronger physically, and he's a better wrestler, comes from a higher pedigree. NCAA Division I wrestler does Chandler come from. A double leg takedown ability. He's got the ability to suplex, not the most optimal for his cardio, but just is more of a testament to how strong he really is. He's got a single leg takedown does Chandler, the ability to mat return. I think he's the better wrestler here as Chandler. And in theory, he could land a big shot on the feet, but I think that Oliveira is the better striker here. I think that Oliveira is more technical. He's a Muay Thai striker. I think he's more varied as well. I think that Oliveira could have success landing low kicks on Chandler. Chandler stands heavy on that lead leg. We even saw Dan Hooker beat up his lead leg prior to the knockout. Oliveira utilizes front kicks, head kicks, jumping attacks, like a front kick at range. He has good straight punches. His punches are just much cleaner than the Chandler. Chandler's just mainly trying to set up the overhand right. Like, he just doesn't have a lot of good variety, just doesn't really throw in combination. Again, his strikes are powerful. And so in theory, he's like a threat to anybody while standing. But I think that the more technical striker here is Oliveira. Not to say that he'd for sure win the stand-up exchanges, but I actually do think that he could win the striking exchanges aggregate based on that. He's also got some power himself. He's hurt some durable guys like David Tamor, Nick Lentz comes to mind, Jared Gordon. So, and we've also seen Chandler rocked more than once. I mean, just going back on his Bellator fights, and for those of you that are in the US, I don't know if it's in other countries right now, but if you go to Bellator.com, you could see previous fights of fighters. Chandler got rocked badly in the rematch with Brent Primus, a guy that's not known for power punching. He also got finished via strikes by Will Brooks. I know that there was a little bit of controversy there. It was a little weird how the stoppage materialized, but he was also knocked out by Patricio Pitbull. So again, this is good competition and everything, but so is Charles Oliveira. I would not put it past Charles Oliveira to land a big shot on the feet and maybe hurt Chandler, but I also think that Chandler could realistically hurt him as well. Oliveira was rocked by David Tamor. He also doesn't do the best job of moving his head off the center line. Doesn't control range particularly well. I think that if Chandler being the more explosive athletic guy, if he wants to close that distance, I think he can and maybe land something big and hard and put Oliveira down. Oliveira's going to be a real threat from the bottom position, I think, early on while he's got some gas in the tank. He typically slows down in round 2, as evidenced by his fights with Ricardo Lamas and even against Kevin Lee. He got that submission there in round 3, and that's a fair point. But again, that's after 60 seconds of rest on the stool. He had some cardio there off of a sloppy takedown attempt from Kevin Lee to get the guillotine choke. So I'm not ready to say that Oliveira suddenly has good cardio. I know that there's some hesitations on the Chandler side as well, But at least with him, if I think he's going to be the guy in top position, I think that would help his cardio more down the stretch. I just tend to favor the top control grappler. And I think that Chandler is competent in top position. He's shown me enough composure. He's also got some very hard ground and pound. Maybe he could finish Oliveira similar to how Paul Felder did. To where I think he could probably stay out of trouble from Oliveira. Again, I think that Oliveira will be a real threat to sweep, reverse Chandler early and maybe lock something up on the way down. But I lean that Chandler could stay out of trouble. I lean that Chandler could get some top control time. And Chandler has been 5 rounds more than Oliveira. Oliveira has never been 5 rounds. I know that he was scheduled to go 5 rounds with Kevin Lee, but he still got tired there in round 2. And I know that it was at Brazil altitude, high altitude, not as high as Mexico City that we were touching on earlier, Denver, but it still is high altitude nonetheless. But when you see him slow down in these other fights, like against Lamas, it still gives me a bit of pause about Oliveira's cardio. So I'm going to side here with Michael Chandler. I think he more often than not wins. But again, I would like to preface that by saying I think it's a very close fight. I agree with the odds and that it's a very competitive fight that could go either way. I think that whoever wins could win in impressive fashion, and the fight might not look competitive from what we see in the time that it plays out, but it's a fight where like the pendulum could easily swing one way or another. And that's why a competitive fight. I just think that both guys are just so strong and threatening offensively that they could exploit the other's weaknesses, which in turn could lead to a finish. But the rationale for picking Chandler here is, again, I think he's a better athlete. I think he's a better wrestler, and he's more experienced going 5 rounds. But like I said, I have hesitations about his durability. I think that Oliveira will be a threat standing. I think, like I said, Oliveira's a more technical striker. And I think that Oliveira on the ground, at least early, maybe he could, threaten Chandler in a way where he hasn't been threatened before. Because even though I lean that Chandler will stay out of trouble, he hasn't really faced a grappler like Oliveira. Like, yeah, he's faced black belts. Like he faced Benson Henderson, he faced Brent Primus, but it's a bit different going against a guy who leads the UFC, has the highest submission wins in UFC history in Charles Oliveira. So again, I think it's an awesome booking. I actually love the fact that the UFC booked this fight for the title because the stock on both guys is super high. Chandler's coming over from Bellator with an impressive knockout win on the same card where Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor fought. And obviously people know Oliveira, a guy that's on a tremendous winning streak. He's the guy that soundly beat Tony Ferguson. So I know that people have their hesitations, like why isn't Dustin Poirier fighting? Why isn't Conor McGregor fighting? And of course, Khabib is retired. But the reason being, as a general reminder, I'd like to say is because, at least on Twitter, sources said that, the fight was offered to Poirier. He refused. He wanted to fight McGregor instead. So it all kind of comes full circle when we consider all those details. So that'll do it for the breakdown. I would encourage you guys to stick around just a little bit longer, only because I would like to let you guys know about Daily Fan MMA. That is a site, that is Brett Apley's site that I contribute to, and that is where my betting services can be had. I know that you guys are probably sick of the banner down below, but we're putting together a lot of great content for you guys, and you won't, with the subscription over there to the Betting Hub, you won't only get my bets and breakdowns, which I already have one placed, but you'll get Technical Tim's analysis and breakdowns as well for his bets, and Brett Apley. So you're getting 3 sharp minds with one purchase. So like it helps enlighten, sort of the perspective on things, right? So I'm really excited to be working with the guys. And in addition to just the Betting Hub, there is just a lot of great content on Daily Fan MMA. I mean, Brett Apley has done such a great job of establishing his site. It's tremendous. Like I know he's behind a paywall, but like all the DFS resources, betting resources, just breaking down matchups, it's all there. Like if you want to play Super Draft, we got you. FanDuel, we got you. DraftKings, we got you. Written breakdowns on the fight themselves, the analysis of it, we got you. Podcast breakdowns, we got you. Like anything you could think of for these UFC cards, we got you. We've even got Bellator and PFL content. Tim does the PFL content, I do the Bellator content, but like we're expanding our options a lot. So I would really encourage you guys to check it out. It's for a reasonable price. Again, it's dailyfanmma.com, and it's just a site where it's not like again, our predictions are very good, and long term they have a good percentage, but it's not just like us picking winners. We're giving you guys the resources for you guys to put yourself to win long term. So you get access to everything, optimizers, ownership projections on scores. I can't say enough good things about it. So I really encourage you guys to check it out. If you're a DFS guy, if you're a betting guy, if you're both, or if you just have interest in the matchups themselves, I would really encourage you guys to check it out. You could also, my bets are also third-party tracked and verified at betmma.tips /AnthonyS364. But yeah, that'll do it for the show. I want to thank you guys so much for sticking around. I appreciate each and every single one of you. If you guys like the show, please hit the like, please ground and pound that subscribe button, and please feel free to leave a nice comment below. I want to wish you guys all the best. Good luck on the event, and take care.